I know that you don't really identify as like right wing at all. So I really wanted to get your perspective on like why you think so many Trump supporters and like why that like MAGA base has sort of like taken this sort of language of gematria and like how they've sort of like weaponized it to force some of their agendas on like a larger population, if that makes sense.
Sure. That has to do with QAnon. That's why that's
Yeah,
happened.
yeah,
And I feel like QAnon was created to discredit a lot of things.
yeah. So they kind of like they're using gematria because they want to discredit gematria, you think?
I do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a controlled op QAnon. Um, so if they were using Gematria properly, they'd understand why all the elections are rigged selections, and they'd be talking about the same things I've been talking about. Again, we said 4 years before this election why they'd be putting Trump back in. We said
Hmm.
way before 2020 why they'd be installing Biden as number 46, 46 weeks after the Pope's birthday. In 2016, I was laying out why it was going to be Trump before Super Tuesday even came around. Um, and again, it's not a partisan thing. It's just you can see the way the game is rigged.
Yeah.
QAnon, it's like this right wing Christian hopium that Donald Trump is some kind of white hat here to save the day from the New World Order, which is a complete joke. So,
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. Also, do you mind if I record the meeting and use parts of it for the video? Totally fine if you don't want to, but just wanted to check.
yeah, I don't mind at all. I know you want to do
Okay.
an interview, so I don't know if we started yet or these are just some pre questions, but
That was just kind of like an introduction, like that. That's not. Yeah, we can like officially start if you want to.
yeah, whenever you're ready.
Recording in progress.
Perfect. Okay, let me make sure this is working. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so like I said, I'm sort of more focused on like the QAnon side of things and like why they're attracted to something like gematria and like sort of like why they're wanting to utilize it. And I didn't really want to like go into this video like putting my own biases and like my own like preconceived notions on the subject without talking to somebody who's well versed in it. I know just from like looking you up and like understanding, Gematria Effect news, like you've been studying gematria for like since like 2013, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So like you seem like an expert in the space, so I wanted to definitely get like your side of like gematria before just, putting my thoughts behind it because that's, not really a fair shot of like talking about it. So I've got some questions prepped, but do you have like anything you're hoping to get out of the call as well?
Uh, Not off the top. You said you want to do an interview for your audience, and I'm happy to spread the information. You also said you were a skeptic, and I enjoy talking to skeptics. So
Awesome. Okay, sweet. I'm really excited, and I appreciate you taking the time as well.
yeah, welcome.
Cool. So, when did you first discover gematria, and what was the first connection you made that sort of like got you into this space?
Yeah, I found it in August of 2013. I was looking for what it was about numbers and rituals for over a decade. Again, it was September 11th that really got me seeing that there must be something to number and ritual because to me it seemed quite obvious that day. Uh, New York, the 11th state, the buildings look like an 11. The first flight was AA 11. Bush Jr. was the president. 11 years to the day earlier, his father had given the speech about a new world order, free or a tear. That was September 11th, 1990. Of course, in numerology, 11 is the master number. So it was obvious it had something to do with numerology. And after that, I just noticed patterns in numbers and news stories, and they really happen quite often. And I'm kind of surprised more people don't catch on. It's just like the other day was the 4th of July, and In the
Hmm.
headlines was the death of a rapper at age 47 on the 4th of July. The Dodgers got wasted at home by the Astros, their worst loss at home since 47. And perhaps on a holiday, it's even more obvious when these things happen. But yeah, if you do pay attention, there is a lot of number ritualism in the news and just simple things like date numerology. Today's a 7 date numerology, for example. We're doing this July 9th, 2025. And one of the top headlines today is that Trump threatened 7 countries with tariffs. And, once upon a time, I didn't know Gematria, but once I learned Gematria and was aware of it, just things started to make a lot more sense. For example, today's July 9th. We write it 7-9 in the US. In this practice of coding numbers into words, Gematria, tariffs equates to 79. So you see that as a top story on 7-9. You go, 7 countries threatened with tariffs on 7-9. But yeah, it was looking into what it was about numbers and why they might be used ritualistically, and where numerology would gain any significance, and why this would be something that the people at the top would use. And it took a long time to understand it as well as I do now. But uh, over the years, just reading and researching, it was August of 2013 when I came across Manly P. Hall's The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And in that book, he lays out the ancient practice of coding numbers into words. And he doesn't give a lot to the reader, but he says this practice of coding numbers into words goes back to ancient alphabets such as Hebrew and Greek. And within English, some people contend that there's a numerical sequence to it as well. And it kind of dawned on me. I was like, oh, maybe that's why there's an alphabetic order. Maybe that's why it matters that A is the first letter and B is the second and C is the third. So
Hmm.
he lays out in one section of the book the ciphers that could be of the English language, the alphabetic order. A is 1 up to Z is 26, and then the same alphabetic order with numerology applied. And then a little bit later in the book, he explains the practice of doing things identically in reverse, which is also something Aleister Crowley's written a lot about. And Aleister Crowley also has more detailed books on this subject, the letters and numbers. But of course, what I teach are the 4 base ciphers of the English language, like I learned from Manly P. Hall's The Secret Teachings of All Ages: alphabetic order, reverse alphabetic order, and both orders with numerology applied. And again, that gives you 4 values for a word. Day after day, if you pay attention, you'll see how these numerical values for a word are used ritualistically. And to me, it's beyond a shadow of a doubt. Again, I've been here every day since August of 2013, showing example after example how our government definitely works by this knowledge. The world's biggest corporations, definitely the sports leagues. Um, but yeah, it was looking into what it was about numbers and then researching it. And by the way, this whole thing of letters and numbers comes from Kabbalah.
Hmm.
Kabbalah,
Yeah.
obviously a spiritual practice. It's most closely connected to Judaism, but it's not only used by Jewish people. And again, within Kabbalah's Book of Formation, there's only so much written about Kabbalah because most of it's been passed down orally. But the Book of Formation is one of the most well-known Kabbalistic texts. In the opening paragraph says, God created the world with numbers, letters, and words. And obviously, numbers, letters, and words, that pertains to Gematria. And essentially, my conclusion is that the people at the top who use this knowledge are essentially playing God by this Kabbalistic belief system day after day. So.
So with your coverage, you said you kind of focus on like 4 different types of gematria, and that's like taking a look at your calculator. That's like ordinal, reduction, and then reverse ordinal, reduced. Do you ever use like the original Hebrew gematria for anything?
I could do a lot more research. My first book that I wrote, which I wrote in 2017, talks about why there's 26 letters in the English alphabet. In
Hmm.
Hebrew, the tetragrammaton, the 4 letter name of God, it equates to 26. And in English, our word for God is 3 letters. It's God, obviously. G's the 7th letter using the alphabetic order. O is the 15th letter, D is the 4th. God adds up to 26 in English as well. Again, the 26 letter alphabet. If you take the alphabetic order with numerology applied, the word letter is 26. There's a lot to it. The name Adam is 26. Obviously, God makes Adam in the 26th verse. And for people who are not familiar with this, um, in the Hebrew study of letters and numbers, it's pretty much all connected to the Torah, which are the first
Yeah.
5 books of the Bible, known as the 5 books of Moses. But that's where you can start to see that there's these overlaps with Hebrew and English. God is connected to 26. Again, in the 26th verse, God makes man. And uh, in the image of the gods. It's actually plural, which is kind of interesting. But um, I drawn a few other observations from Hebrew and English, just overlaps. Just there's a lot
Mhm.
with Israel and names like Netanyahu. They have the same value in Hebrew and English, but I could do way more research in the overlaps with Hebrew and English. I'm sure there are many more, but the overlaps are definitely there. You could say that that's probably somewhere where the research could be expanded greatly because, as far as I know, not a whole lot of people have gone deeper into the overlaps with Hebrew and English.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about that because I didn't really see anything on it
Ah,
either.
here, just to answer
Yeah,
something though, I'm sure you're aware that I talk about the number 201 a lot.
I actually have not seen that yet.
Oh,
No,
okay. I bet. Yeah,
201.
my second book, I focus on that number a lot, and that's because it was written after the Event 201 simulation for Cooties 19. I'm sure you're aware. I'll call it Cooties 19 in case I.
I got you. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You know that that was simulated with something called Event 201, correct?
I'm not familiar
Oh,
with that.
yeah, that was the simulation for Cooties 19. If you want to look that up sometime, it was October 18th, 2019, the same day the military World Games began in Wuhan, China. But I've been working on a book exclusively on 201 for the last 5 years. And if you look up what 201 represents in Hebrew,
Hmm.
it has to do with enlightenment, like, being knowledgeable. And it's interesting because it's a very special number to the people at the top. And, as I educate about a lot of the time, this number is venerated by the Jesuits.
Yeah.
People aren't aware, but the Jesuits are who created the calendar system that says we're having this interview July 9th, 2025. And the Jesuits have a lot to do with English's standardization of the 26-letter alphabet, which happened at the same moment in history that they rolled out the Gregorian calendar at the end of the 16th century. And in this Gematria code, the Jesuit order equals 201. So does Order of Illuminati. And the Illuminati was founded by a Jesuit, Adam Weishaupt, May 1st, 1776. And he ended up dying in history 201 days after the anniversary of the Illuminati's establishment. What's funny as well is the phrase in English, knowledge is power is 201. And again, in Hebrew, the 201 has to do with knowledge and enlightenment. And obviously, Illuminati means illuminated. You're in the light. And into the occult, light is knowledge. This 201 number goes from the beginning of the Jesuits up through the present. The Jesuits were originally recognized by the Roman Catholic Church to stop the Protestant Reformation led by Martin Luther.
Hmm.
And from the pinning of the 95 Theses by Martin Luther to the creation of the Jesuits was 201 months later. Later in the Jesuits' history, when they were suppressed by the Pope, you can read their own history. They were supposedly preserved by Catherine the Great in Russia with 201 Jesuit priests. In more recent history, a lot of people overlook this, but the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., he assumed the name Martin Luther. He was born Michael. He assumed the name Martin Luther after the Protestant Reformation later. He ends up getting killed on the 95th day of the year, like Martin Luther penned the 95 Theses. And the nation's first gun control legislation came later that year in October, 201 days after MLK's killing. And this Gematria thing, the founder of the Jesuits, Ignatius of Loyola, his name equates to 201. The first Jesuit pope, who was Pope Francis, his birth name, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, equates to 201. When Pope Francis recently just died, again, there's multiple ways to do this. His full name, if you apply numerology, instead of it equaling 201, it equals 111. Pope Francis just died on the 111th day of the year, which was Rome's birthday, 201 days after the anniversary of the death of St. Francis of Assisi, which is who he was named after. But Pope Francis was also the first Jesuit pope and the first to live in Suite 201 at the Vatican. Part of the reason I said way in advance why Biden would win in 2020, I was one of the only people on the internet explaining why he'd become number 46. When Beau Biden, his son, died at 46, he died 201 days before Pope Francis's birthday.
Oh,
And
damn.
the Jesuit priest who did the funeral for Beau Biden at age 46 also did the inauguration for Joe Biden when he swore in on that big, thick Bible. And if you look him up, he was the 42nd head of Georgetown, the nation's first Jesuit university, which opened its doors before we got the first recognized president later that year, George Washington. And by the way, George Washington died with the Jesuit priest at his side, who ended up dying 201 days from his birthday eventually. But coming back, the Jesuit priest who did the funeral and the inauguration, his name is Leo Jeremiah O'Donovan, and it equals 201 in Gematria. Um, the 201 matters a lot because inauguration day, it wasn't always January 20th. It got moved to January 20th. And if you count from July 4th to January 20th, that's the 201st day of the US's age. And the majority of the world writes that date 20/1 like 201. And if you look up what the official title of that day is at the US government website, it's called Inauguration of the President of the United States. That's what they titled the event. That equals 201 when you take the alphabetic order with numerology. More recently with Trump. By the way, the word Catholic is 46, like there's 46 books in the Catholic Old Testament. JFK was killed at 46, the nation's first Catholic president. By the way, if you run it forwards, Catholic equals 35, like he was number 35, killed on I-35. But Catholic 35 forwards, 46 in reverse. Joe Biden becomes the nation's second Catholic president, elected exactly 46 weeks after the Pope's birthday, after the death of his son at 46. And then he gets inaugurated on the Pope's 35th day of his age. But more recently with Trump, both Trump and Biden are both Jesuit educated, like a lot of people are who are in the largest government offices. Trump, do you remember when Trump's ex-wife died July 14th, 2022, his ex-wife? Do you recall that?
Yeah, I do.
If you go back and look at the three stories came out that day related to Trump, and the third one was about his wife falling down the stairs and dying. The first story that came out that morning was Trump said he will run in the upcoming election. The second story that came out that day were conservatives against Trump, and they were saying he wasn't fit for office based on all the legal cases against him. And this was even before all the indictments with Alvin Bragg and what happened in Georgia and everything else that came after. But it was based on 60 legal cases that were already out there against him. And then the third story that came that day was Trump's ex-wife fell down the stairs and died. And why this stood out in such a major way, and again, I was covering each story day by day. I'll often put out 5-minute video after 5-minute video. But from the very first one, I was saying, look at this, you guys. Today is 60 weeks after the first ever Jesuit Ignatian year began. And for people not familiar with the Jesuit Ignatian year, it ran more than a typical calendar year. It ran from May 20th, 2021, the 500th anniversary of Ignatius of Loyola being shot, which changed his life from a soldier to more of a monk, which put him on the path to create the Jesuit order. But May 20th, 2021, and it ran until July 31st, 2022, which is the day in history that Ignatius of Loyola died. So it ran, again, more than a typical calendar year. So Trump's ex-wife died at the very end of that Jesuit Ignatian year, exactly 60 weeks after it began. And again, in the morning, he came out and said, I'll be running in the upcoming election, which is the 60th. It was the 60th U.S. presidential election. And just for the record, Donald Trump equals 60. But then later that day, then you have 60 legal cases that are being presented by a conservative group that doesn't want Trump. And then you have his ex-wife die. But then she was buried on July 20th, which is the 201st day of the year. And I was explaining then, I was saying, see, I told you a couple of years ago why they're going to put Trump back in for the 60th. Now you have this happen at the midway point. By the way, you learn this Gematria thing, indictment equals 60, Alvin Bragg equals 60. It was just a nonstop 60 show. The whole thing was 60 minutes right now, the 60 minutes settlement. But
Right.
these ongoing, recurring dates in history, when you learn to pay attention to them, you start to see who these dates are so significant to. It's a lot to explain, but there were so many rituals, major rituals in the time of that first ever Jesuit Ignatian year. Go back when Biden and Putin met before the war with Russia and Ukraine began. They met on Pearl Harbor Day of all days, obviously connected to war. And that was 201 days into the first ever Jesuit Ignatian year. And remember, the Jesuits were preserved in the time of their suppression by Catherine the Great, the leader of the Russia, with 201 priests. But, Biden's telling Putin not to start a war. And of course, Putin goes on to start the war. And what days does he start? He starts at February 24th officially, which is the day in history the Jesuits implemented the Gregorian calendar. But the war also began in the Donbass region, which happens to equal 201, which is the most contested area that Russia wants control over for strategic purposes. Anyway, I've been talking for a long time, but the point is there are certain numbers that are very special. and you can see the gematria coding in English. But since you asked me about Hebrew, again, 201 really gains its significant from the Hebrew code. It has to do with knowledge and this occult knowledge specifically.
Okay, nice. I have a lot of questions, and I appreciate you providing that. So in terms of like other special numbers, like within Gematria, 201, 46, I've noticed that like currently on your YouTube channel, on your banner and everything, you have the number 47. Of course, that aligns with like Trump being the 47th president, but I'm curious, what is the significance with 47 currently at this moment?
Sure. Just to tell you something, when my research began, when I was a novice to this and just learning about it and trying to figure things out, I mostly stuck to 3 numbers just to see what I could gain by following these patterns. And they were numbers that I just saw a lot in the news before I even knew what gematria was. And that was 47, 74, and 33. I saw these numbers all the time in news stories. Just this past week on the 4th of July, Kerrville gets wiped out. And if you read the story, they said they sent the first alert to Kerrville at 1:14 in the morning. And a lot of people will overlook that, but it's like, wait a minute, that's the 74th minute of the day on 7/4. And then other things people will overlook is that town is named after James Kerr of the Texas Revolution, which ended in history on April 21st, 74 days before the storm hit. That's another topic. But to answer what you said about 47, 47, if you pay attention, it is hard to not see a 47 in TV shows and movies. And I'm talking almost every episode that's out there, almost every movie that's out there. If you're actually paying attention, this is a number they are putting in front of you all the time. J.J. Abrams says he encodes 47 into every work he does. And it's not just J.J. Abrams, even though he's really one of the only outspoken people on this. Where 47 gains its significance is in the history of Masonry. The Masons study the 47th problem of Euclid. And in Gematria, you just see the magic of this number. The word authority equals 47. The word government equals 47. The word president is 47. So is Caesar. The word White House is 47. Republican is 47. Democrats 47. When you just run the alphabetic order in reverse, the letters D, C add up to 47. You think about a guy like Lincoln who gave the speech about 87 years ago. He doesn't say 87 years ago, though. He says 7 years ago. Lincoln converted the Whig Party to the Republican Party. Whig, the way they spell it, W-H-I-G, is 47. This 47 is omnipresent in this study. And it's just like I said, on the 4th of July, you think about this nation's birthday, the 4th of July, 4th day, 7th month. The 47th problem of Euclid is what we all learned about in geometry class. They didn't call it that in geometry, but it's a squared plus b squared is c squared. And the ancient builders, to make perfectly square foundations, they were very aware of this formula and to create perfect 90-degree angles. So this is an ancient mathematical concept to the builders, and the Freemasons began as builders. They become more of a brotherhood and a political network, obviously, in more recent years. By the way, modern Freemasonry was founded in London, England on June 24th, 1717, which was a date with 47 numerology. If you look into the history of the Masons laying their cornerstones for buildings, they like to do it in 47 rituals. You can read about this. George Washington, for example, laid the cornerstone for Washington, D.C. on September 18th, 1793, which was a date with a numerology breaking down to 47. The cornerstone for the Washington Monument was laid later in history on the 4th of July. So many rituals with the presidency in 47. You think about a guy like Bill Clinton, Jesuit educated at Georgetown. He became president 211 days before his 47th birthday. 211's the 47th prime. Trump equals 47. The Apprentice equals 211. Again, 211, the 47th prime number. You think about the Vatican. Vatican equals 47. Their birthday is 211. February 11th, the Vatican's birthday. 211, 47th prime. I should mention that just other things connecting to authority. The word Christian is 47. Confession is 47. The word time itself is 47, and I don't think anyone would argue, but time is the ultimate authority. It's the one authority that everybody has to adhere to at some point or another. And even the tropics of this earth, which measure the solstices, are separated by 47 degrees in the way that they laid out the coordinates of this earth. And, that's not arbitrary. Again, there are people at the top very aware of this knowledge that use it all the time. But like I said, just this year on the 4th of July, you got a dead rapper on 4/7 at age 47, and they said he self-deleted himself. And I don't want to say the word because I know social media hates it, but the SUICIDE word, it equates to 47 in this Gematria code. Like I said, the Dodgers got wasted this year by the Astros, and it was their worst loss at home since 47. Houston won 18-1, just for the record. Houston, Texas equals 181. And do you recall when Harvey devastated Texas? Do you remember that back in 2017?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Vice News has an article making fun of everything that I said about that. But I showed why when Harvey devastated Texas, why it was going to be the Astros over the Dodgers in the World Series in August. The reason I bring that up is the Astros and Dodgers were playing each other in the MLB as again, Texas gets devastated by a flood. And what's wild is when Houston beat the Dodgers in that World Series after Harvey, that was the 113th World Series. This flooding that just happened was 113 days before the start of the upcoming World Series. It's kind of a little bit off to the side, but the point I'm making is this is what I educate about: how the world of sports is scripted, news is scripted, how weather control is a very real thing, and it often is connected to the world of sports. And it might seem overwhelming, but again, if you just look at the history that's actually there, the fact that this nation was founded by people that were members of secret societies. Freemasonry is based in Kabbalah. Again, Lyndon Johnson, the former Texas politician who became president due to the assassination in Texas, who said, "Who controls the weather controls the world," to Texas State University back in '62. If you want to talk more about the flooding later, I can tell you just how connected this is to Lyndon Johnson. But to make a point, if you go back and listen to what Lyndon Johnson said, he said they're developing a weather satellite that will control the world's weather. He says this in the speech. Funny enough, that phrase weather satellite equates to 249. That Texas town just got wiped out on the U.S.'s 249th birthday. And if you look up James Kerr, who Kerrville's named after, his birthday is the 24th of September. The majority of the world writes that date 24/9. It goes with the rapper who's dead, who's connected to Tupac from his group, the Outlaws. Tupac is named after Tupac Amaru, whose birthday is also 24/9. So his associate is dead on the 249th birthday of the nation, and not to mention Tupac equals 74, and so does his alias Machiavelli, so does the word rapper. Again, 7447. No matter how you write the date, you got the guy's dead at 47, connected to the bigger name who he came up under, Tupac. But yeah, 47. Oh, I didn't give you a 47 word, by the way, that has to do with authority. The word news itself is 47. And I talk about 47 almost every single day, and I do call my channel GematriaEffectNews at this point. For people who have been around, my first 16 channels were just called Zachary K. Hubbard, but I decided to switch it up after all those deletions. And I used to have a show on Truth Frequency Radio, and that was a network ran by Chris Geo. He called my show GematriaEffectNews on there, so I finally adopted it for my YouTube channel.
Nice.
And yeah, anyway, when I created the logo, I just thought it would be appropriate to throw 47 in there since I educated about it so much.
Yeah.
By the way, just another recent 47. Joe Biden, when he took office with Obama, when Obama was the president, Obama took office at age 47, and Joe Biden was the 47th vice president. When Joe Biden became president-elect in 2020, he'd been serving the federal government since 73, thus for 47 years. So Joe Biden had to be a member of the federal government for 47 years before becoming president himself, when again, president and White House also equal 47. But please, next question, I guess.
Well, I wanted to stay on that for just a second because I found some connections with 74 and 47, and I just want to get your thoughts on like if this is an actual connection or if I'm just like putting things together that like aren't supposed to be. But basically what I found out, like a big thing that I talk about on my channel a lot is sort of like how the working class needs to like wake up to the reality that like American politics, really all Western politics, is a distraction from like the actual war that is yet to be waged, which is like the working class versus the billionaires. I'm a self-proclaimed leftist. That's like what I believe. That's kind of like what my channel is about, is educating people on that, but like still in a very like fun way. I found that the word billionaire in reverse Pythagorean is 74, and then the word working class, or the two words, is in reverse Pythagorean is also 74, which I thought was kind of weird.
That is interesting. That is interesting.
Is that an actual connection, or is that just what do you think on that?
I'd have to go back through the years, and the point is, in this numerical system, words are assigned numbers through the system, and what you'll see in the media is they will contrive rituals, just like again making it about Tupac on the nation's 249th birthday, wiping out this Texas town in light of what Lyndon Johnson said back in '62. So there probably have been plenty of rituals with 74 and billionaire over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the one thing that comes off the top of my head is just I spent most of my adult life in Seattle. For people who don't know, I'm from Portland, Oregon, and Bill Gates. He was the billionaire in the '90s coming up, and him
Yeah.
and Bezos, they both started their companies in New Mexico, the 47th state, and they both moved them up to Seattle. Well, Microsoft more Redmond, the suburb, but that Microsoft's in Seattle, Bellevue, and Redmond. But all of those towns are on the 47th parallel. And again, this has a lot to do with why the first UFO sighting was by Mount Rainier from Seattle on the 47th parallel, and then Roswell in the year 47 in the 47th state. But the point I'm making about Bill Gates is his headquarters is right there at the Seattle Center, which is a 74-acre lot, and of course it's across the street from the world's biggest needle. And he was part of the Event 201 simulation, which you should look up, which was on the day leaving 74 days left in the year, which was also on a date with 47 numerology. But yeah, there probably is something to that. I haven't really done any research on billionaires and 47 and 74, but I think you're giving me a little lead to look into.
Nice.
So
Yeah, I was just curious, like, because I was plugging away on the calculator, looking at stuff. I also saw that Oppenheimer is 47, reverse Pythagorean, and then nuclear is 74. And then I guess that's like all I found. Oh, also my name in Hebrew, or Ben, on the Hebrew calculator is 47. That was
Interesting.
kind of weird. Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to get from your point of view sort of the significance of 74, 47. So I
They're
appreciate you
numbers.
answering that.
They're numbers that are also connected to God in the study, and just in the most simple cipher. So really, the thing that showed me right away that there must be something, because I when I first came across Manly P. Hall, like I said in his book, he only gives you a little bit of information, and he almost seems like he's skeptical about it himself, the way he writes about this potential numerical code behind the English language. Again, I started with a notebook and I wrote everything down, and I noticed, like, within the first day, I just noticed way too many words equated to 74 in the most simple cipher. Again, just A is 1 up to Z is 26, as simple as it gets. English equals 74. Gematria equals 74. This is
Mhm.
occult knowledge. The word occult is 74. Masonic is 74. Holiday is 74. You think about this nation's birthday, 7-4. Holiday means holy day. Obviously, there's several of those for religions, especially in the West. So, Christianity, Jesus, cross, Messiah, gospel,
Yeah.
parables, they all equate to 74. Sometimes he'll go, what, how are those related? Well, Jesus spoke in parables. The story of his life is the gospel. If you look it up, the English translation of Jesus is actually Joshua, which also equates to 74. And the 74 list, it's just really long. Another word that equals 74 is killing. And I always thought it was funny that 3 of the first 5 US presidents died on 7-4. And if you look into those 3, they all had it out for the Catholic Church. Again, Jefferson and Adams were the most outspoken about the Jesuits and how if they came out of suppression. A lot of people don't realize that, but this nation was founded while the Jesuits were in suppression. And I think that's why the Illuminati was created in that time because it was founded by a Jesuit. I felt like it was a way for the network to stay alive while the Pope had him under wraps. But Jefferson and Adams died July 4th, 1826. And then 1,826 days later, Monroe died on July 4th. It's like, it seems pretty numerological. But yeah, 74 is a big time killing number too. And like I said, with what just happened in Kerrville, a lot of people dead on 7/4. The town's connected to the Texas Revolution. It was 74 days after the anniversary. And they're saying the emergency alert went out for Kerrville at 1:14 a.m., which is the 74th minute of the day. That number 74, just like I said, the Event 201 simulation for Cooties 19 was on the day leaving 74 days left in the year. Cooties 19 was the biggest thing that the world's had to deal with, well, and probably more specifically our nation, but really the whole world was impacted by 9/11, blamed on the 19 hijackers 19 years earlier. The World Trade Centers were on the 74th meridian. I'll remind people there's a song out there by Slipknot called Gematria, the killing name. Again, Gematria and killing, both 74. There's also another song out there about this code of ABC 1, 2, 3 and killing. It's by The Police. It's called Murder by Numbers. It came out in 83, where the word murder is 83. It's a whole nother topic, but yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess with that number, like 47 specifically, I've found, and like the first time I was introduced to Gematria was from from Trump supporters, like at Trump rallies. And I'm curious, like a lot of Trump supporters have sort of hijacked this numerical system to sort of like push their ideas and like, this idea that like Trump is the Messiah, like he's 47, Messiah is 74, 47. Like I guess sort of like starting with QAnon, like how do you feel about like this movement that a lot of people see as sort of like a huge threat to like American democracy right now? Like how do you see them like utilizing this numerical system to like push their ideas and agenda, with like you being so well versed in it? Like I guess like what are your thoughts around that?
Well, see, that's just it. I mean, it's occult knowledge, right? And it's not what I'm talking about. It's not like it's perfect science. Like perfect science, it repeats the exact same way every single time, correct?
Mm-hmm.
There's a layer of discernment needed here. Interpretation's another thing. Somebody who's one of these QAnon cult members, they could look at it just like that. They could go back to the historical piece where in the Israeli Times, there was an article written about how a certain Jewish rabbi over there thought Trump might be the Messiah.
Yeah, I saw that.
And, that was circulating while Trump was 74 years old. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that Trump was given a significant amount of acreage in Golan Heights by the Israeli government while he was 74. All of this stuff was going on around the same time. But yeah, if I'm drinking this Trump hopium, I might be like, wow, our meeting ended. Well, we were on Zoom and our meeting dropped. So I don't know if there's another way to keep it going. All right, stand by. Yeah, again, for people who were watching the interview, he said he was a skeptic but wanted to interview me on the knowledge. And I think initially he might have thought, just because what he was coming across with QAnon, that maybe I was one of them, but certainly not. So I didn't know the interview was just going to end like that. I think he might have put the timer on too short. I'll end this for now, and if he sends back another link, I guess I'll do a part 2. So we'll see what happens.